allegations of neglect within a local nursing home after families are unable to see their loved one in person for months due to COVID-19. Two cases are now part of an ongoing police investigation, one of which led to a complaint filed with a state agency. Tonight, 10 News anchor Jenna Zipton is working for you to get answers. But first, we do want to warn you, some of what you're about to hear and see may be disturbing.
This is the last day Julie Parsons spent with her 96-year-old grandmother.
I was always there with my nanny. I was her biggest advocate. We were together all the time.
She says Helen Norfleet, who suffered from multiple ailments, moved into Raleigh Court Health and Rehab Center in 2018, and she visited multiple times a week. But when COVID hit, that all changed.
March the 13th was the last time that I was there in the facility.
No visitors allowed. They stayed in touch with video calls, and Parsons says everything was fine for a while.
But then we started noticing a decline.
In September, Parsons says she got a call that her grandmother tested positive for COVID, and the next day she was told she had fallen out of bed.
And I asked, how did that happen? She has bumper pads on her bed. And I was informed that the bumper pads were not on her bed that morning.
Then came October.
I was notified that Nanny had 2 wounds on her toes on her left foot, and that they were going to be watching those and taking care of those.
Weeks later, Parsons says she got another call. Her grandmother's foot was getting worse, and Parsons decided she wanted her taken to the hospital.
When they took the bandage off, the bone was exposed on her second toe. You could see the bone sticking out. It was so awful.
Parsons says 2 toes were removed, and then the family made the decision to move her to another facility. But in November, Nanny went back to the hospital and was put on hospice, dying 1 day later. Parsons says she filed complaints with multiple agencies, including Adult Protective Services. 10 News pulled search warrants and found 2 cases being investigated for 2 different women at Raleigh Court. The first search warrant shows investigators wanting Helen Norfleet's medical records, police looking into possible neglect against the 96-year-old. According to the warrant, in October, a report was filed with Adult Protective Services and Roanoke Police, stating the level of care decreased dramatically once the facility stopped allowing visitors. Our investigation also found this December report from the Office of Licensure and Certification, run by the Virginia Department of Health. It says, in part, the quality of care requirement was not met. Concern that her foot was not assessed by a physician for more than 2 months. The failure to regularly document the condition of the wounds made it impossible to determine when the wounds formed and the resident's condition deteriorated. The state survey concluded that failures constituted neglect of the resident that resulted in harm.
My nanny went peacefully, but I think about the absolute neglect and the horror that my nanny must have went through.
Raleigh Court's plan of correction filed last month includes that it is not an admission to and does not constitute an agreement with the alleged deficiencies, but did take actions, including that everyone who lives there was reviewed for skin impairments and to ensure assessment and treatment is accurate. Our investigation found 4 other reports for Raleigh Court listed on the VDH website going back to 2016 that have been investigated, and the facility had to provide a plan of correction. The other search warrant asked for medical records of another woman in her 90s who lived at the facility and went to the hospital 1 month after Norfleet's condition was first reported to police and Adult Protective Services.
I really believe if families were allowed to still go into the facilities and visit their loved ones and kind of be that checks and balances, none of this would have happened. I really honestly believe that.
10 News contacted the Commonwealth's attorney, who says both cases are being reviewed and more people need to be interviewed. We asked for an interview with Raleigh Court, but they declined and sent us this statement that reads in part, quote, "While a family member and a clinician's perspective will often vary in regards to a loved one's health condition, we are unfortunately precluded from commenting due to privacy laws." We operate in a heavily regulated industry that has mandatory reporting requirements and other intentional measures to ensure that vulnerable patients are thoroughly protected. But Parsons says she's not done fighting.
My prayer is that not one more person endures what my nanny endured.
The Commonwealth's attorney told me it can take up to 90 days to complete the investigation, and he expects it will take at least another month. 10 News will continue to follow this closely. You can see the documents and Raleigh Court's full statement on WSLS.com. Jenna Zibton, 10 News, working for you.
If you want to look closer into reports concerning this facility or any other, we've posted the link on this story at WSLS.com. Tomorrow night at 7, we'll tell you what you can do to make sure your loved ones are being taken care of, especially during a time where it's difficult to see them face to face.
Live from WSLS, this is 10 News at 7, working for you.
One family's emotional story.
We brought her here to hospice, and she went about 4 days, and it was the toughest thing I've ever done in my life.
A local man's warning for you after his mother died. Good evening, and thanks for joining us for 10 News at 7. I'm Brittany McGraw. New tonight, a 10 News investigation finds more cases of possible neglect. The number of elderly people becoming victims keeps rising across the Commonwealth. Thousands of cases are opened every year in Virginia, and about half are substantiated. 10 News anchor Jenna Zibton is working for you to uncover new details about elder care during the pandemic and why efforts to protect our elderly may have done the opposite.
Jim Gregory wishes he could call his mom.
She would normally answer the phone, "Hey, sweetie, how you doing?"
She fell at home in October, broke her femur, and never recovered.
I miss calling her every morning. It hurts.
She went to the hospital, then to a nursing facility for a couple of weeks, and then was transferred to Raleigh Court Health and Rehab. He says after weeks there, his mom wasn't herself.
We were really seriously concerned now. The call, she was very weak. Oh, it was like, not mom.
He went there and says with a rapid COVID test, they let him in.
She was on death's doorstep. It's probably why they let me in, and I was able to hold her hand.
He took these pictures at Raleigh Court before she was taken to the hospital.
Her tongue was black, her teeth were missing, the teeth that were there were black, her toes were orange, the bedding that was soiled, still wet.
Our 10 News investigation found a police search warrant asking for medical records for the 86-year-old from November through January. We're told this is still an active police investigation, one of 3 at Raleigh Court. The document says a report was filed with police claiming she was neglected. The allegations include that in the 2 months she was at Raleigh Court, Gregory was abused, lost weight, developed several health problems.
She was in deplorable condition.
Our 10 News investigation also found 4 referrals filed with Roanoke City Adult Protective Services, who investigated and sent this letter saying, quote, "There is a preponderance of evidence that Lillian Gregory was a victim of abuse, neglect, or exploitation."
It was one of those things that you feel responsible for, because I should have yanked her out of there a long time ago, but I didn't, and I'll live with that the rest of my life.
Lillian Gregory died January 21st, 2 months after she was first admitted to Raleigh Court.
We are seeing some alarming situations.
Joni Latimer is the state long-term care ombudsman. Local ombudsmen serve as advocates for people living in places like nursing homes.
Our 10 News investigation found 12,000 adult protective service cases were substantiated from March of last year when COVID hit through February of this year. The most of any region was here in the Piedmont region with about 3,500. That includes Roanoke, Lynchburg, and Southside. Across Virginia, more than 4,500 instances of neglect, physical, mental, or sexual abuse.
This has been a perfect storm in a terrible sort of way.
She says during COVID, nursing homes essentially had no oversight, and they're just now seeing what's happened over the last year inside. Latimer says once they weren't allowed in because of COVID restrictions, complaints dropped about 35%. And now that complaints are picking back up,
The problems, the concerns, the care pitfalls are greater. So, I mean, there are things like just day-to-day care, personal hygiene, which sounds like not such a big deal maybe. However, we all know that there's a cascading connection between that and development of bed sores if people aren't taken to the toilet in a timely manner, are sitting in waste. Those are the sorts of things that become particularly glaring concerns.
They need to have people looking into what's going on in there, whether there's COVID or not.
Raleigh court says they can't comment on patients, but sent us this statement saying in part, quote, "We stand by the quality of care that we have always delivered, and we understand that the death and dying process can be very difficult for patients and families, and even medical professionals can differ in their opinions. Still, our skilled staff show up every day to care for those who need support, even in the most challenging of circumstances." Many people are calling for changes to Virginia policy to protect the growing elder population. I'll have that part of the story next month. Jenna Zibton, 10 News, working for you.
To see the steps you can take if you have concerns about a loved one and other parts of this continuing 10 News investigation, head to WSLS.com. Some local people are pushing for changes at the state level. As we told you first on 10 News, charges are not being filed after an investigation into a Roanoke nursing home, but that's not stopping the push for change. In a 10 News investigation, anchor Jenna Zibton is working for you, finding out what they're doing next.
Changes could be coming for how your loved ones are taken care of if these two get what they want.
Virginia apparently is among many other states that provides little guidance within the law about the standards of care that are required for nursing homes or assisted living facilities. And that presents a problem for criminal prosecution in that you don't have a standard against which to gauge what has been done or not done.
Roanoke City Commonwealth Attorney Donald Caldwell knows that well. His office decided no charges could be filed after investigating 3 cases of possible neglect at Raleigh Court Health and Rehab Center, including 96-year-old Helen Norfleet, who died after 2 toes had to be amputated. Caldwell says our 10 News investigation uncovering the major gaps in Virginia policies and laws showed exactly what needs to be done.
You've done a good job of taking some examples of where the system is not doing as well as it can, and you've done a comprehensive overview to try to be sure that people get the best care possible. We need to take a hard look legislatively on what we're going to require for businesses who operate in this area.
Will you be talking to legislators?
I will be. Delegate Head has a lot of experience in this area. It might be we can get something before the General Assembly as soon as this next session.
Julie Parsons is Norfleet's granddaughter.
I feel devastated. I just have been so heartbroken not to have my nanny.
After her death, Parsons became an advocate for others in nursing homes.
And you're not going to stop pushing for change?
No, I will advocate for change. As long as I'm here on this earth, I think there needs to be some real strict guidance and regulations and some new laws put into place that protects our elders.
Staffing standards, the number of people who are working on duty, those are all things that need to be addressed in order to have a criminal prosecution. But I would stress that having the ability to have a criminal prosecution is not really your goal. The goal is to have the best possible care.
As we've reported, Virginia lawmakers tell 10 News more needs to be done to protect people in nursing homes, and we'll be watching what happens in Richmond at the Capitol. Jenna Zibton, 10 News, working for you.
Jenna has been investigating this since last year. You can find all of her stories on WSLS.com. And if you have concerns about the care of a loved one, let us know by looking for this story on our website.